Chapter 1. The Girl Who Counted Clouds. In the quiet village of Fernfold, tucked between two hills shaped like sleeping lions, lived a girl named Elinor, who counted clouds. She lived at the top of Bellflower Tower with Aunt Liss, an old herbalist who smelled of thyme and carried tea leaves in her pockets. Every morning, Elinor would climb the spiral staircase to the rooftop with a notebook in her lap and a pencil behind her ear, ready to number each cloud that passed, fluffy ones, stretched ones, those that looked like ducks or spoons or forgotten dreams. She didn't know where she'd come from. Aunt Liss always said, "You arrived with the autumn mist and a smile too wide for a baby." No one in the village remembered her parents, and Elinor never pressed. There was something comforting about not knowing, like a mystery half told. But she often wondered. On one gray morning, with the wind humming low and the clouds marching fast overhead, Aunt Liss didn't wake up. She wasn't dead, just feverish and faint, her skin damp and her breath thin as spider thread. Elinor made her chamomile tea, placed cool cloths on her forehead, and whispered, "Don't worry, Auntie, I'll find help." That's when she remembered the shop. Down on Clockmaker's Row stood an old shuttered building with crooked eaves and a brass sign that read, "Windle and Wonders, time for all." Nobody had stepped inside in years. Master Windle, the owner, had disappeared a decade ago, vanished one morning with nothing left but ticking echoes. But Aunt Liss used to say, that man knew how to turn moments into miracles. So Elinor set off, scarf fluttering behind her like a tail. The village looked smaller than usual, as though it too had caught a chill. She passed the bakery where the windows were dusted with flour, the silent post office, and the old tree stump where Mr. Brog the tailor used to play chess with himself. Finally, she reached the clock shop. Its door moaned open at her touch. Inside, the air was filled with dust and silence, but not an ordinary silence. This was the kind of quiet that holds its breath, watching, waiting. Hundreds of clocks lined the walls, from tower-sized to tiny pocket watches, all stopped at different times. Elinor stepped carefully past them until her eyes landed on a small object on the workbench, a brass compass. Only it had no letters, just a single arrow, gently pulsing with a golden glow. As she picked it up, something clicked beneath her feet. A cuckoo clock on the far wall burst into song, though the bird inside had long since flown. Startled, Elinor almost dropped the compass. But instead of pointing north, the arrow spun once, then froze, pointing out the door, toward the edge of Fernfold. She frowned. "Are you giving directions?" The compass pulsed again. She looked around. No one. Of course not. Just gears, glass, and forgotten time. Still, something tugged at her. Curiosity, hope, or the whisper of adventure. With a final glance back at the clocks, she tucked the compass into her coat and stepped outside. The arrow shifted, now pointing down an alley she had never noticed before. It wasn't on any village map. The alley was narrow, lined with ivy and moss-covered stones. At the end, a tiny fountain gurgled quietly. An old woman sat nearby, staring at the water. As Elinor approached, the woman looked up. Her eyes were pale blue, like frost on windows. "You found it," she said, not unkindly. "Found what?" "The clockmaker's heart," she replied, nodding at the compass. Elinor blinked. "This?" The woman chuckled. "That little thing? Oh no, dear. That's only the beginning. But hold it close. It doesn't point to places, it points to moments." "What do you mean?" But the woman was already gone. Vanished, as if the mist had swallowed her whole. Elinor stood alone beside the burbling fountain, the compass warm in her hand and the wind swirling stories she hadn't yet lived. She didn't know what lay ahead, only that her feet were already following the arrow. Back at the tower, Aunt Liss murmured in her sleep, dreaming of bells and stars. And above, the clouds kept passing, too many to count. Chapter 2. The Compass. Points to memory. The compass ticked in Elinor's pocket, not with the sound of gears, but with something softer, like a heartbeat, remembering a lullaby. She followed its glowing arrow through twisting paths and cobbled lanes she hadn't walked before. It led her not out of Fernfold, but deeper into it, into forgotten corners, overlooked by time. First, it brought her to the old town fountain. It had once been the heart of village gatherings, a place where children splashed and lovers whispered beneath the chime of bells. Now it sat cracked and dry, its statues dulled by moss. Elinor hesitated beside it, unsure why the compass had brought her here. Then she noticed the stone plaque at the base, half hidden beneath ivy. Kneeling, she brushed it clean. The engraving was faint, but readable. "Let joy flow freely, and time will remember." Just as she read the last word, the compass vibrated gently, and a trickle of water bubbled from the fountain's mouth. Startled, Elinor stepped back. The fountain hadn't worked in years. She turned to see if anyone else had noticed, but the square remained empty, the village hushed and gray. The compass ticked again, and its needle swung east. She followed. Next, it led her to a shuttered shoemaker's cottage. Once, Mr. Doric had lived there, a kind man who made dancing shoes and hummed while he stitched. But after his wife passed, his song had gone silent, and so had his hands. Now the windows were shut tight, and dust cloaked the porch. But as Elinor stepped near, she heard something, barely audible, a hum, a slow, uncertain hum, as if someone were trying to remember the tune of a dream. She knocked. No answer. Then, instead of knocking again, she gently opened the compass and held it out. The humming stopped. The door creaked open. Inside, Mr. Doric stood blinking at her, holding a spool of golden thread. "Is that Wendell's compass?" he asked softly, his voice raspy with disuse. Elinor nodded. "It pointed here." He gave a strange smile. "Then perhaps it's time I remembered." He gestured to a dusty cabinet in the corner. "Inside there's a box. I locked it away after she left, after the music stopped. I was afraid if I opened it, the memories would hurt." Elinor didn't move. "You don't have to." "No," he said. "I think I must." He opened the cabinet, revealing a small box carved with roses. With trembling hands, he lifted the lid. Inside were a pair of worn dancing shoes, tied together with ribbon. A note lay beneath them. "Keep dancing for both of us." Mr. Doric read the note, and tears welled in his eyes, but they were the kind that washed, not drowned. The compass pulsed once, softly. From the back room came the sound of a music box starting to play. Elinor left him there, humming again, this time with a smile on his lips. The compass turned once more. Its final stop that day was the edge of the orchard behind the mill. The trees here were wild and overgrown, their branches tangled like old thoughts. As she stepped between the trees, the air shifted. Everything grew still, as if waiting. In the center stood a stone bench wrapped in ivy. Etched into its surface was a name, Mira Elinor Wren. Her name. Elinor froze. She had never seen this place before. No one had ever mentioned it. The compass arrow glowed white, brighter than before, and its tick grew louder. Slowly, she reached out and touched the stone. A rush of images filled her mind. Not clear pictures, but impressions. A woman with kind eyes singing beneath a tree. A lullaby of bells, the smell of lavender and clock oil. Tears pricked her eyes. She didn't understand it all, but a warmth bloomed in her chest. Somehow, this place remembered her, or someone who once had. She sat on the bench, letting the silence speak. Above her, a single apple dropped from the tree and landed beside her foot. She picked it up and turned it over. Carved into its skin was a tiny symbol, the same as on the compass, a spiral wrapped in wings. Wendell's mark. As the sun dipped low, Elinor stood. The compass was quiet now, its arrow dim. But something in Fernfold had shifted. The air felt lighter, the trees straighter. The wind whispered less of endings and more of beginnings. Back at Bellflower Tower, Aunt Liz stirred in her bed, murmuring, "The timekeeper's child." And in the village square the fountain bubbled on. Chapter 3. The Hourglass Forest. The following morning, Elinor awoke before the church bells. She had barely slept. The compass lay on the table beside her bed, quiet and still. But when she touched it, the arrow flickered to life and spun wildly before fixing in a new direction. West. Through the window, a thin mist curled over the fields like milk poured too slowly. Elinor packed bread, dried cherries, and her mother's old scarf. The only thing Aunt Liz ever admitted was hers. Then she slipped out of the tower with the compass in hand, its arrow now steady and glowing faintly blue. The path led beyond Fernfold's edge, where few villagers ever wandered. There, the forest waited. Locals called it the Hourglass Forest, not for its shape, but for the strange way time behaved inside it. Some said a minute could stretch into an hour. Others claimed they entered in summer and stepped out in autumn. Most stayed away. Elinor stepped in. The trees were tall and ancient, their trunks spiraling upward like carved pillars. Light filtered through the leaves in slow, lazy shafts, and every sound echoed with peculiar delay. Birdsong that finished after the bird had flown, a twig snapping that echoed moments too late. She followed the compass along a winding path thick with ferns. As she moved deeper, the colors seemed brighter, the air heavier, like syrup clinging to her skin. Then she heard it, a rustling behind her. She whirled. Who's there? Out from the underbrush bounded a hare, not an ordinary one, but tall as a child, with deep violet fur and a silver monocle over one eye. "About time," he said, twitching his ears irritably. "I thought you'd never arrive." Elinor stared. "You talk?" "Obviously. And you listen, which is a good start. Most don't." He brushed leaves from his waistcoat. "I'm Vesper, clockkeeper of this part of the forest." Elinor blinked. "You're a... what?" "Clockkeeper," he said again, as though explaining breakfast. "I look after time here. Try to, anyway. But everything's been slipping since Windle vanished and the hollow clock stirred." Elinor frowned. "What's the hollow clock?" Vesper's ears twitched and he glanced around. Best not speak its name too loudly. It listens. He hopped forward. "Come. If the compass brought you, we've no time to lose." The path curved into a clearing where the trees leaned inward, their branches forming a dome. In the center stood a giant hourglass, suspended between two yew trees, its sand shifting upward instead of down. "Windell built that," Vesper said, "to keep this place balanced, but lately it leaks time like a cracked teacup." Elinor stepped closer. As she did, the compass arrow glowed brighter. "You're connected to it," Vesper murmured. "To all of this. I'd wager you were born under a chime moon." "I don't know what that means," Elinor admitted. "No," Vesper said, "but the forest does." He pointed to the base of the hourglass, where a line of small brass gears lay scattered in the grass. "It's losing moments, memories. That's why nothing here stays still, why the birds forget where they nest, why even your village forgets the joy it once held." Elinor crouched and picked up a gear. It shimmered faintly in her palm, humming with a tune she couldn't name. "What do I do?" she asked. Vesper studied her carefully. "The compass brought you here, not me. It chooses seekers, not followers. And you're its seeker now." Elinor hesitated. Then she placed the gear gently back into the hourglass base. There was a sharp click. The sand paused. The air shifted. For one heartbeat, everything in the forest held still. Then the sand reversed direction. A warm wind stirred the trees. A bird sang a full song without delay. Somewhere a forgotten bell chimed once. Vesper gave a low whistle. "You're mending it." Elinor stood. "I don't understand any of this." "You don't need to," said Vesper. "Just keep going." The compass flickered again. This time the arrow spun north. Vesper adjusted his monocle. "That'll take you to the clock tower's root, but be warned. It runs close to the hollow clock's echo. Shadows gather there." Elinor nodded slowly. "Will you come with me?" "I'll be watching," Vesper said. "But this path must be walked alone." He bowed, then vanished into the bracken like smoke in reverse. Elinor turned back to the path, the compass beating like a second heart. Behind her, the hourglass glowed, and for the first time in years, the forest breathed in rhythm. Chapter 4. Windle's Watch. The forest grew darker as Elinor followed the compass northward. The air was damp with the scent of moss and forgotten rain, and though the sun still hung somewhere above the trees, the shadows deepened with every step. The path soon narrowed into an overgrown trail choked with briars. Just as she began to wonder if she had lost her way, the compass gave a sudden, strong pulse. A faint ticking filled the silence. She pushed through the last curtain of leaves and stumbled into a hollow unlike anything she had seen before. It was not a clearing, but a sunken space in the earth, as though a giant bell had once rested there. Thick tree roots hung overhead like frozen waterfalls, and in the center stood a stone dais carved with spiral patterns, the mark of Windle. Upon it lay an object wrapped in velvet. Elinor stepped forward. With a hesitant hand, she lifted the cloth. A watch lay beneath it, small and silver, with filigree hands and a domed glass face that shimmered like water. Beneath the hands, tiny symbols circled the edge: a feather, a flame, a key, a teardrop. She picked it up. Instantly, the compass began to spin. The watch sprang to life, tick, 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 its hands whirling faster than any ordinary timepiece. And then it spoke, not in words, but in images. Elinor saw flashes. Master Windle hunched over his workbench, pouring stardust into a gear. A baby wrapped in a lavender blanket. A great clock with hollow spaces where memories should have been. And then darkness, deep and cold, swallowing the village from the edges in. The vision vanished. Elinor staggered backward, heart pounding. So this was Windle's final invention. Not a watch that told time, but one that remembered it. She turned it over. There, on the back, an inscription read, "For the one who will mend the hours." "Me?" she whispered aloud. A voice echoed from above. "It was always meant for you." Startled, Elinor looked up. A man stood on one of the tree roots, his coat as pale as fog, his boots silent on bark. "Who are you?" she asked. "I am called Never," he replied with a half-smile. "A guardian of lost time, and at times, a finder." There was something unsettling about the way he stood, too still, too smooth. The watch in her hand ticked louder. "You know Windle?" she asked. "I knew of him," said Never. "He meddled. He bound time to hope and gave it a compass. Not wise." Elinor narrowed her eyes. "Why are you here?" "To warn you," he said. "That which forgets cannot be mended. Some things must remain broken." The compass's needle jittered. "I don't believe that," she said. "Belief," he murmured, "is the first lie we tell ourselves to feel brave." He turned, vanishing into the trees without another word. Elinor clutched the watch tighter. She didn't trust him. His presence left a cold trace, like frost on a window just before it cracks. With a deep breath, she returned to the dais. She placed the watch beside the compass. The moment they touched, a beam of light shot upward from the stone, revealing a spiral staircase carved into the very earth beneath her feet. She hesitated only a moment before descending. The stairs led to a cavernous space lined with gears taller than houses. Pipes snaked along the walls. In the center stood a massive cylinder of glass filled with glowing sand, suspended, unmoving, a broken time engine. Around its base were empty sockets. One glinted faintly, watch-shaped. Elinor stepped forward and fit Windle's watch into the hollow. The chamber trembled. The sand stirred. One by one, the gears began to move, slowly at first, then smoother, faster, stronger. The pulse of time returned, steady, deliberate. Elinor felt it beneath her skin. It was not just the forest, the village, the compass. It was her. Her heartbeat had always marched to this rhythm. Then the sand began to change. Shapes formed within it, memories not hers. A laughing girl in red shoes, an old man kissing his sleeping wife's forehead, a child learning to tie laces with sticky fingers. All the moments Fernfold had forgotten, they weren't lost. They were waiting for time to turn true again, and now it had begun. As the gears turned, the staircase collapsed behind her, folding into the ground. But Elinor was not afraid. The compass blinked once, then pointed toward the surface again. She pocketed the watch. The hollow clock's shadow may still rise, but Wendell had left her more than tools. He had left her time and the power to mend it. Chapter 5. The Festival That Never Was. When Elinor emerged from the forest, Fernfold was not as she remembered. The streets were clean, the windows polished, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh bread and chimney smoke. Children's laughter echoed down the lanes. Bells chimed softly in the distance. For a moment, she thought everything had been restored. But then she looked again. A boy kicked a ball down the cobbled lane. It bounced once, twice, then again. Elinor blinked. The same kick, the same bounce, the same laugh, again and again. A woman carried a basket past the bakery. Her scarf fluttered, her smile gentle. Then she turned back, passed again. The scarf fluttered, the same smile, again. Fernfold was caught in a loop, a perfect day, repeating endlessly. The compass trembled in her hand. The arrow spun and froze, pointing to the village square. She hurried there, heart tight in her chest. At the center of the square stood a grand stage wrapped in ribbons and wreaths of paper lanterns. Banners fluttered in a wind that no longer changed. Villagers danced, clapped, and played violins in a joyous circle. But their eyes were glazed. Their feet moved without thought. Their smiles were too wide, too still, like puppets in a memory. In the middle of the crowd stood a wooden sign. The Festival of Light, Eternal Joy. Elinor stared. There's no such thing. She turned to a baker clapping along to the music. Excuse me, she said. When did the festival begin? The baker looked at her blankly. Festival? He asked, still clapping. Today is the Festival of Light, our happiest day. But when did it start? She pressed. The baker smiled. Why, it's always today. Elinor stepped back. The air thickened. The compass flickered with warning. Why trap them? She whispered. She already knew the answer. Never. He had done this. Locked the town in its happiest memory, where no sorrow could reach them. A prison of joy. A soft voice called from behind. It's beautiful, isn't it? Never stood near the old well, his hands tucked neatly behind his back. You did this, she said. I preserved them, he replied. Look how content they are. No pain, no regret, no time. Elinor's fingers clenched around the compass. This isn't life. Isn't it? He tilted his head. Isn't life just a loop of what we wish to keep and what we dare not lose? No, she said firmly. It's messy, uncertain, it moves forward. He sighed as though disappointed. Wendell said the same, and look what became of him. He trusted people to feel, she said, even sorrow. The compass pulsed in her palm, not pointing, but glowing. She understood. Let me show you something, Elinor said, stepping toward the stage. Never raised an eyebrow. Show me? She climbed onto the wooden boards. The villagers kept dancing, caught in rhythm. Elinor, never warned, you'll break it. That's the point. She reached into her satchel and pulled out the silver watch. It ticked softly, the symbols on its face glowing in turn. She turned the crown gently. The ticking slowed and then stopped. The music ceased. The villagers froze. Wind whispered. Then, one by one, faces changed. Smiles faltered. Eyes widened, and memories returned. A woman clutched her son to her chest and wept. A man dropped his violin, blinking as though waking from a dream. The laughter faded, replaced by silence, and then quiet confusion. What day is it? Someone asked. The festival vanished. The ribbons curled to dust. The stage creaked. Never's eyes burned with cold light. You've undone perfection. I've restored time, Elinor said. They deserve their real lives, not a shadow of one. The villagers turned toward her, unsure, yet no longer lost. Never stepped down from the well's edge, his form flickering at the edges. "You think you've won," he hissed, "but every clock runs out. I'll find another loop, another place." "Not if I find you first," she said, raising the compass. It pulsed once, and he vanished into mist. Silence returned. Then someone lit a lantern. A child began humming a song. One by one, the villagers helped each other up, sweeping the square, rekindling fires, and preparing supper. Not because they were caught, but because they were alive. Elinor sat on the steps of the old bakery as the sun finally began to set. The sky turned a deep honey gold, and real shadows stretched across the stones. The watch ticked gently beside her, and the compass pointed to the east. Chapter 6. The Shadow of Never. Elinor left the village at dawn, before the first bell rang. The compass glowed softly, its arrow now fixed eastward, pointing beyond Fernfold's meadows and into the jagged hills that curved like a broken crown across the horizon. She didn't look back. With Wendell's watch ticking steadily in her pocket and her satchel packed with bread, a candle stub, and a coil of copper wire, she followed a path only the compass could see. The fields grew wilder, then vanished altogether. Moss blanketed the ground. The trees here were thin, their limbs like pointing fingers. By noon, mist began to cling to the edges of her coat. Elinor felt it before she saw it, the shadow. It moved with her, not beside or behind, but with, like an echo trying to predict her next step. Each time she paused, it stopped. Each time she turned, it slipped just beyond sight. She reached the ridge by evening. Below lay a black valley filled with swirling fog, and at its center, an ancient spire of cracked obsidian stone, rising like a thorn from the earth. The compass pulsed. The arrow pointed straight to it. As she started down, the ground felt spongy underfoot, as though the valley itself had once been full of water, and time had drained it dry. She wasn't halfway across when the voice came. "I wondered when you'd find your way here." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It slid between her thoughts like wind through a keyhole. Never. He stepped from the mist, his form more distinct than before, taller, sharper, his coat longer, trailing behind him like smoke. His eyes no longer held curiosity, only hunger. "You've been undoing," he said. "I've been restoring," Elinor corrected. "Is that what Wendell told you to believe?" he asked. "That time is a line? A thing you can fix with gears and good intentions?" "I don't need to believe it," she said. "I've seen it." Never's smile faltered. "You're not like him," he said after a pause. "You feel too much. That's dangerous." "Maybe," Elinor said. "But it's mine, and it's real." He moved closer. "You could stop running, you know. Stay here. I'll show you 1,000 perfect yesterdays. Ones where you were never left. Ones where the world was always kind." Elinor's hands trembled slightly, but she stood firm. "That's not life." "It's better than life," he insisted. "It's safety." "Safety without freedom is a cage," she replied. The mist thickened. Around them, strange figures began to form, shapes with no faces, made from shadow and memory. One looked like Aunt Liss, another like Master Wendell, others flickered through a dozen identities. "These are echoes," Never said. "They remember better than the living. They don't forget. They don't break. They don't grow," Elinor said, "and they don't forgive." He lunged. Elinor dove aside, hitting the ground hard. The compass flew from her grasp, skidding across the earth. The shadows circled, Never raised a hand, and the mist became a wall, trapping her in a ring of time long broken. Sounds from her past echoed. The distant laughter of a mother she couldn't remember, Aunt Liss calling her name, the hush of wind in Bellflower Tower. Memories twisted into chains, but the watch was still ticking. Elinor gritted her teeth and pulled it out. She opened the back, revealing its tiny, delicate gears and the slot Wendell had carved, but had never filled. It wasn't for a battery or a winding key. It was shaped like a heart. Elinor pressed her fingers to her chest. "I understand now," she whispered. With shaking hands, she removed the scarf she always wore, the one Aunt Liz said belonged to her mother, and unwound the hidden locket sewn inside. Within was a picture of a smiling woman, and tucked behind it, a single baby tooth wrapped in thread, her first memory. She placed it into the heart slot of the watch. It clicked. The ticking changed, stronger, louder, alive. A golden wave burst from the watch face, knocking never backward. The shadows screamed and evaporated into ribbons of smoke. The mist peeled away. The obsidian tower cracked from base to tip. Never writhed, his form losing shape. "You don't know what you've done." "I've remembered," Elinor said, and that was enough. With the compass recovered and the watch glowing warm in her hand, she stepped back from the edge of the shattered valley. Time, once tangled, began to loosen, and Elinor, no longer just a girl who counted clouds, climbed toward dawn. Chapter 7. The Compass Breaks. Elinor arrived at the edge of the valley just as night surrendered to morning. The cracked obsidian spire behind her was nothing more than a splintered ruin now, and the mists that once blanketed it had scattered like frightened birds. The compass, still warm in her palm, glowed faintly, its arrow flickering as if unsure which way to turn. She followed its uncertain light along a ridge path, through birch woods stripped bare of leaves. Everything was quieter now. Too quiet. No birdsong, no wind. Just the steady, slowing tick of Wendell's watch. At the top of the hill, the path ended at a stone gate buried in bramble. Its arch bore an inscription worn nearly smooth with time. What is mended must choose to move forward or remain forever still. The compass pointed toward it, then blinked out. Elinor tapped it. Nothing. She turned it over, but the brass casing had dimmed, and the arrow now lay motionless beneath the glass. She wound it, shook it, still nothing. "No," she whispered. The compass had never failed her. It had guided her through shadows, through memory, through unraveling time itself. And now it was still. A soft crack split the silence. A fine line etched itself across the compass face, then another. The arrow twitched once, shuddered, and the glass shattered. Elinor gasped, clutching the broken instrument to her chest. But there was no saving it. The delicate parts lay scattered in her lap like autumn frost. The heart of Wendell's invention, his magical moment seeker, was gone. Tears welled in her eyes. "Why now?" she whispered to the sky. Behind her, the morning stretched thin and pale. Below, the village of Fernfold lay in silence, as though bracing itself. She sat on the stone step of the gate for a long time. It would be so easy to wait here, to pretend she hadn't come this far, to pretend she hadn't failed. Then, from somewhere in her coat, the watch ticked once, just once, but enough. She opened it. The tiny symbols spun rapidly, faster than ever before. The flame, the feather, the teardrop, all circling a new symbol she hadn't seen before, an open door. The inscription inside blinked like starlight. To set time right, let go. Let go. She looked again at the compass, broken and lifeless in her hand. And then she understood. The compass had never been the magic. It had been a guide, a bridge, but the power to move forward had always been inside her. Holding her breath, Elinor stood and laid the broken compass gently beneath the stone gate. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she stepped through. On the other side, everything changed. The world shimmered. She was standing inside the old clock tower at the heart of Fernfold. But it was not how she remembered it. The gears were golden. The walls were woven from woven pages of forgotten journals and whispered songs. Every tick echoed with 1,000 voices. This was not a tower of time. It was a tower of moments. At the center stood the final mechanism, a colossal dial with missing parts, empty slots shaped like memories. Elinor stepped forward, her heart thudding. The watch in her hand began to hum. One by one, symbols rose from its face, becoming shapes of light. A dancing shoe, a fountain's trickle, a golden thread, a baby's laugh, a broken scarf mended with love. Moments she had found, moments she had healed. She placed each one into the dial. With every piece, the tower trembled. Not in fear, but in anticipation. When the final shape, a single note of music, clicked into place, the dial spun once and stopped. The clock tower exhaled. Its bells chimed, not in time, but in joy. Outside, the village stirred. Doors opened. Smoke rose. The frozen seconds of Fernfold thawed and flowed freely. Time had chosen to move forward, and so had Elinor. She turned back toward the gate, but it had vanished. There was only a sunlit stair leading down to the square. She descended slowly, the watch ticking softly at her side. She no longer needed the compass. She had become the keeper of moments, and the keeper walked with purpose. Chapter 8. Time Flows. True. Elinor stepped into the square of Fernfold just as the morning bell rang. This time the chime echoed naturally, not frozen or echoing in loops, but bright, clear, alive. The village breathed again. Doors creaked open, shutters swung wide, and for the first time in many moons, the scent of freshly baked honey bread mingled with the light of day. Children ran down the lane, not repeating yesterday's footsteps, but leaping toward tomorrow. Aunt Liz stood outside Bellflower Tower, leaning on her cane, her cheeks rosier than they'd been in weeks. "There you are," she called with a weak laugh. "Off restoring the world again, were you?" Elinor ran to her, the ticking of Wendell's watch steady at her side. "I thought I lost you," Elinor whispered, hugging her tightly. "You never lost me," Aunt Liz murmured, brushing her hand through Elinor's curls. "You just hadn't turned the page yet." Around them, Fernfold stirred like a story waking from slumber. Shops reopened. Lanterns were lit not out of memory, but out of celebration. And though everything looked the same, Elinor could feel it. Something deep had shifted. Time was flowing again, not as it once had, but as it was meant to. By mid-afternoon, a small crowd gathered in the village square. Mr. Dorris the shoemaker brought out a polished stool and began tapping his toe in rhythm. Children danced, villagers sang, and the fountain bubbled cheerfully as though catching up on all the stories it had missed. Elinor watched from the stone bench, her satchel resting beside her. Then she felt it, a faint warmth from the watch. She opened it. One final symbol pulsed at the center of the dial, a feather cradled in a circle of stars. As it blinked, the hands spun once, then stopped. Beneath the glass, new words had appeared. "Return to the place of beginning." Elinor looked up. The clouds passed above, slow and drifting. Of course. She climbed the spiral stairs of Bellflower Tower one last time, each step rising into memory. When she reached the rooftop, the wind greeted her gently, tugging at her coat like an old friend. There she sat, legs tucked beneath her, notebook in her lap. She glanced up and gasped. In the sky above, the clouds no longer moved in aimless herds. They danced in patterns, soft spirals, silver threads, swirls that seemed to draw lines through the air like invisible ink. It was as though the sky itself were remembering. She flipped open her notebook. But this time, she didn't number the clouds. She wrote a letter. "To whoever finds this, I once followed a compass that didn't point north, but to memories, mistakes, and moments that needed mending. I thought I was lost. I thought I needed answers. But the truth is, we are not puzzles waiting to be solved. We are clocks, strange, ticking things made of hopes and heartbreaks. And we must be wound not with fear, but with love. I have let go, and I have found. If you are reading this, you are already where you are meant to be. Turn the page." Elinor Wren. She folded the letter and tucked it beneath a loose tile beside the weather vane. As she stood, the clouds shifted again, forming a shape she recognized, a spiral with wings. Wendell's mark. She smiled. Below, a train whistle echoed from the edge of the valley. A ribbon of smoke curled above the trees. It was time. Elinor packed her satchel, tucked the watch into her coat, and descended the tower. Aunt Liz met her at the gate with a warm loaf and a small folded map. "You're leaving, then?" she asked softly. Elinor nodded. "There's more to see, more moments to mend." Liz kissed her forehead. "And more memories to make." At the station, the conductor tipped his hat. "Where to, miss?" Elinor hesitated only a second. "Forward." The train pulled away, wheels singing against the tracks. From her seat, Elinor watched Fernfold fade into the golden light of morning. The tower stood tall in the distance. The fountain glimmered, and above it all the clouds whispered on, never still, never silent. The compass was gone, but time was flowing true, and the girl who once counted clouds had become something more, a keeper of moments, a mender of time, a story still being written.